Welcome to the Store Builders Podcast, the place where we talk to industry experts and successful store owners about what it takes to build a thriving e-commerce business. Every episode, we deliver the raw, unfiltered recommendations that will catapult your store to new heights. Ready to get serious about expanding your e-commerce empire? Well, then let's get to work.
I'm your host, Ryan Cowden, and this week we're joined once again by Chris Lemma. In this episode of the Store Builders Podcast, Chris and I discuss how you can maximize your product pages to create the optimal customer experience. The product page is one of the most important elements of the websites you will build. It's more than a page with information about your products. It's a place where you get to design the shopping experience for your visitors. It's a place to tell your story. And effective product pages turn visitors into customers. You may know about the technical elements of web design, but we also need to ask important questions about how your customers experience your product pages. What kind of an experience do you want them to have? How does your knowledge of your customer shape the presentation of your products? And what is the end goal that you have in mind? On this episode, you'll hear the basic elements you should include on a product page. This would include things like product images, prices, sizing, and customer reviews. Second, we'll talk about the goal of a product page, which would include connecting with your customers by telling your story. Third, we'll talk about things you should consider regarding your call to action. The traditional Add to Cart button may not be right for you depending on what you're selling. And finally, we'll talk about the balance between factual information and storytelling that you'll want to include in writing on your product page. There's a lot of actionable advice in this episode, so grab something to write with because you're going to want to take notes. As always, I'll be back on the other side to wrap up any loose ends. So, without any further ado, here's my conversation with Chris Lemma. All right, Chris, welcome back to the podcast. How are things going in your neck of the woods?
Things are great. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So we're talking about optimizing product pages for conversions today, and I thought we should maybe start by just going over what are the basic elements that someone should put on a product page.
So when you land on a product page, when someone is going to buy something, especially if it's a physical product that you're going to ship to them, the most important thing you can put on that page is visual images, right? The notion of an image or several images actually that allow a person to go, I'm not there. I'm not physically in a store. I have to take your word that this is as good as it's going to be. So you want good photos. You want close-ups or the ability to zoom into those photos. You want to make sure that people can, if you're selling a wallet, right? Mm-hmm. I want to know what's the stitching look like on that wallet. I want to know if there's texture on that wallet, right? And so it needs not just like that, here's a single shot of an image from, 20 feet away. You go, that's not going to convince anyone, right? So the photo is a big deal. A story, right? A compelling story that goes with it is going to be critical. Price is critical. Options is critical. But maybe the most important thing other than the image and the price is customer reviews. And you go, wait, what? Yeah. Well, I don't know if you're like me, right? But 50% of the planet starts their shopping search at Amazon. And we've all been conditioned by Amazon, right? And one of the things that we do when we get to Amazon is we skip over the whole, they have it's scientific, right? They're like, here's the photo, here's the price, right? Here's the title. But all the product description stuff is couched in the middle and it's small and there are links that go somewhere else. And you're like, oh yeah, skip right past that. And you get down to user-generated content, which is the reviews. And then they make it a master class in it, right? They're like, you can sort by this, you can filter this. Was this helpful? Look at positive ones, look at negative ones. But you know what I do is again, I don't know if you're like me, but I will literally scroll through reading specifically the bad one, right? Because what I want to know is it really that bad? Is the bad side of it something I'm willing to live with, right? If I'm buying something, right? Let's say I'm buying a window air conditioning unit, right? Mm-hmm. And it says, oh, I'm giving it a 1 star because it didn't come with its own power cable and you're going to have to, attach a cable to it. And you go, that's not the end of the world. That's like a $6 item that I got to go. Like, I would never rate this one, and I'm looking for that. But if it says, this makes so much sound that you can't have a conversation because of how loud this machine is, and you go, ooh, that's bad news. Like, I can't live with that negative side of it, right? And so then you walk away from it. And so reading these reviews, right? I think the last time I looked, 2/3, right? Almost 2/3, 60% of the weight in terms of by character of a Amazon product page is content review.
Wow.
Right? 60%, right? And you go, yeah, well, that's important, right? Yeah, it's gotta be critical, because we no longer trust, right? The 40s, the 50s were gone. We don't trust when a company tells us this is good, right? We go, well, I don't know if it's good. But if other people say it's good, and if enough other people say it's good, then yeah, I'm interested. In fact, again, I don't know how you do it, Ryan, but if I'm looking for a product, let's say I'm looking for a watch at Amazon, I'll filter on two things, right? Prime, which is, can it get to me quickly, and 4 stars and above, right? Like, I don't even look at stuff that has a lot of reviews at 1, 2, 3 stars. I'm like, nope, 4 stars above, and can it get to me quickly? Because I don't want to wait 16 days for something. And once I filter that, that's when I start my search with a filtered piece, right? Okay. So if you're using reviews to filter it, even before you look at the product page, then you know it's critically important on the product page. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so you want all of this information on one page at one time, right? Is that important?
Yeah. So there is a you have to watch and be careful. Every store is different. All the product pages are different. The products you're selling are different. There is the one case where if you're selling product, right, and you're trying to anchor for a certain phrase or a certain keyword or whatever, and your audience calls it something else, or at least it starts going negative and it starts going down a really negative term. Not it calls it something else as in a synonym, right? So if I call it a refrigerator and someone else calls it a fridge, and a fridge, I don't mind that Google wants to say, ooh, I scanned all your content and it turns out that fridge is a better keyword than refrigerator. I don't mind that. But if they're calling it, a stupid jerk, right? I don't want to get anchored for stupid jerk, right? So there are specific situations where either you want to cull through and clean up the reviews, or you may, if you're having that happen a lot, you may want to shift them to a secondary page and say, click here to see the reviews. But for the most part, right? I want to make sure that my product page has the content on it, and particularly the reviews on it, that both people and Google find valuable, right? So photo, title, price, variations, and a compelling story or narrative, and user-generated content in the form of reviews are the key elements at minimum that I would say, hey, make sure that your product page has.
Okay. And then where is this page in relationship to the whole website? So is this the landing page that people are first landing on, or are you directing people to the product page?
That's a great question. It really depends on the store, right? So if you're building, let's say you're a store builder, you're building a store for someone else. One of the first questions you're going to ask is, hey, how many products does this site have? Or how many products are you selling? And they go, we sell 3. You go, okay. So the catalog is not critical here. What's important is 3 product pages that function as landing pages, and therefore my home page is going to direct me to choose A, B, or C, and all the rest of my emails and everything else will land you to A or B or C, because those product pages are the landing pages, are what I'm selling. But if someone says, well, I'm selling 3,462 items, you go, well, then the catalog page is critical, the subcategory page is critical, and my page, my product page is critical. But people are going to navigate through some things to get there, right? In fact, I may, in sites like that, as a store builder, I may recommend to a customer that we spend a lot more time on the category pages than overly optimizing on a product. I mean, if you have 3,000 products, the chances that those people are going to show up to those product pages, right, for each specific one shrinks. So yes, you want the broad template that you design, right? The code you create for the default, what a page looks like to be good. But if people are going to click in and go, hey, I want luxury watches, I want discount watches, I want this, then you might want to optimize those landing pages to tell a stronger narrative there, just to get people saying, oh yeah, okay, I have to buy this luxury watch at this store versus some other, right? Rather than going somewhere else. And so then you start changing up what you're focused on.
Okay, great. As you're designing a product page, what's the goal of the page? Are you trying to get the user to convert to a sale right away, or is it more informative? What's kind of your goal for a user after they look at your product page?
So for me, the most important thing about designing that product page is the story I'm telling, the overall narrative. And what I want for a person to have gone through is for them to feel either an immediate connection to that narrative or an immediate non-connection to that narrative, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't mind if someone goes, oh, this is not for me. I have no problem with that. But what I don't want them to do is come over and be like, right? I want them to either be, oh my God, I have to have this, but I can't afford it right now, but I'm going to keep coming back and looking at it because eventually I'm going to have it. Or, oh, this isn't right for me, right? If you and I were looking at a watch and we went, oh, that looks pretty cool, but you get up close and realize this is a super thick watch. I mean, this is basically built for, he's 6'5", he weighs 220, he's a Marine, and his wrist can handle it. The rest of us would be dragging our arms, because of how heavy it is. You want to know very quickly, oh, this isn't for me, right? Let me just get out, right? So figuring that out, right? So the narrative is what I'm looking for, and I'm looking for people to feel connected or not. Now, how they demonstrate that connection could be, I might monitor how long they spend on the page, right? I might monitor if I put some social sharing on the page, did they share it with people? Like, did they say, oh my God, I one day I want to own this bag, right? So did they do that? Did they put it on a wish list? Did they put it in their cart? What are the behaviors that they're doing? Did they browse through all the images, right? And spend time looking at it? I want people to feel connected, right? Shinola, Shinola. Shinola is a watch company that, well, actually they're a watch and bag and bicycle and wallet company, but they bought this name from a really old company. They wanted some history and narrative to what they were doing. And they're based in, I think, Detroit, and they hand create watches in the US, right? Rather than sending it off somewhere else. And when you go to any of their watch pages, right, you're looking at any individual watch, the story that they're telling, it's not just the watch, right? They're telling you about the band. They're telling you about the casing. They're telling you about the mechanism, right? The movement. They're telling you about the box that it comes in, right? And if you're a watch person and you go through that page, right, you have to decide if the aesthetics are your style, but you're definitely going to be like, wow, I really like what's going on here. Yeah, I need a bookmark, or I need to come back to this, or I need to tell someone about this. And eventually you get to the point where you're like, I need to own one, right? And that's a function of telling the story well, right? So I want people to feel, I want people to feel connected to it. In the case specifically of clothing, I want people to know whether or not it will fit. So sizing so there's storytelling, right? Storytelling is one side of it. And I want the story to be critical and feel like they connect. But in items of clothing, sizing is just as important as storytelling, right? Because if it doesn't fit, I don't want to, I will have negative and incremental regret as a function of the fact that I invested all this time in the story and I was super excited, and then I found out it didn't come in my size, right? And I'm a bigger guy, so if it only runs to 1 or 2x and that's it, and I go, why did I even look at this, right? So sizing is one of those things that you want to pay attention to if it's clothing, right? On the product page, sizing charts. A lot of times people put the sizing chart as a link to somewhere else. Some people don't click that, or sometimes they click a link and then the data that they put in the sizing chart is not necessarily data that people know, right? So if it says here's what an XL means to us, and then it says it's 23 centimeters across your chest, and you're like, first of all, how do I know what 23 centimeters are? And second of all, how do I know how wide my chest is, right? Like, so Busted Tees, right, is one of the companies that has one of the best sizing pages, right? When you go to Busted Tees and you go click on a shirt and then you go in and look at the sizing, they literally take shirts of different sizes and put it on different people. So the first thing you do is you look at people and you go, oh, that guy's a little bit like me. And then they've put him in medium, large, extra large, 1X, 2X, and they show you what it looks like, right? And that's a very visual way of doing the sizing chart, which makes someone feel a lot more comfortable. They're like, oh, yeah, that shirt's going to fit me, or those jeans are going to fit me. Okay, that looks good. I can do this, right? Yeah. So storytelling is critical, but sizing for clothing is also really, really important.
Okay. Now, you mentioned being able to monitor how users are interacting with your website. Is there like an app or a software that you use for that?
Yes, but we would have to go in a whole nother podcast episode to talk about how to monitor that. But as a store builder, right? It's not just enough to code the page. You also want to be able to instrument what's going on so that you can have that intelligent conversation with your store owner to say, hey, we're seeing this, or we're seeing this, or you should be monitoring this, right? So good to know. We should definitely circle back to talking about monitoring that.
Sure.
But yeah, story and size are two of the biggest pieces of I just want to make sure, and it goes back to the same thing I started with, which is I want people to have a connection, right? I want them to feel that connection. And so to that end, right, I need to do that with either story or, in the case of clothing, to make sure that sizing is a key element of them feeling like, yes, I can make a connection here because it will fit me, not I burned all this time and they don't have it in my size.
Right. So one of the things that people say about having these product pages is you want a clear call to action for the consumer to know how they can respond. What should website developers keep in mind as they design specifically the call to action button or piece?
Yeah. So a lot of times, right, we have the generic, add to cart, add to cart, add to cart, add to cart, and that's just what we do, right? And then you're like, well, what if I want more, or how do I engage people differently, right? So you may, for certain kinds of products, you may want to have a different call to action, right? So I can't remember the site that almost every single product they sell is customized, right? Like you can engrave it or something like that, right? And so the button they had, the call to action was something like make it yours, or start engrave me, or choose. Like it was a next step call to action, right? Start your engraving, or choose your personalization, or something like that. And so it didn't say add to cart. And so what happens is you think, oh yeah, I want to see what's next, right? Without like maybe you're not ready to do the whole put it in my cart, I'm ready to buy it. But if it says, take a look at your personalization, or next, personalize it, and you click it and you're into the next step, right? Now you want to do that carefully. You don't want to be deceitful. You don't want to cheat anyone or whatever. But sometimes you can get over that initial hurdle of hesitancy around the add to cart by changing the call to action there. In certain sites, right, when you're selling stuff, there is a secondary dynamic related to price and discounting on volume, right? So if you buy 5, it's a different price. If you buy 25, it's a different price, whatever. So sometimes it's not, the call to action isn't add it to cart. The call to action is check the price or get the price, because you give them a visual controller that says, I want 5, or I want 25, or I want 50, and then that changes the price. So the call to action, right, is, see the price, right? Or check the price.
Right.
And so sometimes the very next step isn't I'm ready to buy it yet. It's I want to know what it costs, or what it will cost me. And then some products, again, depends on the nature of what you're buying. You may not want an add to cart at all, right? You don't want to take them. The notion of a cart is, let me go see all the things that I stuck in my cart, right? Because it's still not checkout. It's cart. It's one step before checkout. But why have the cart at all, right? It's only if you're going to buy multiple things, right? Like the notion of a cart is, I'm going to add this to my cart, go back into the store, grab something else, add that to my cart, go back in the store, add something else. But if you're selling single items, right? Why take them to the cart at all? If I have 3 or 4 products or 5 products or 10 products, and I just want you to, if I have 10 watches, the likelihood that you're going to sell 10 or 3 or 2 watches rather than just one watch, let's go to checkout, right? And so my product page in that scenario may even have the checkout stuff on the bottom of the product page, right? Like I don't even have to go to a checkout. It can literally be, I got my product page, remember we talked about title and photo and narrative and variation, whatever. But do I need quantity? No, I may not need quantity at all, right? You buy one watch, and I may not need you to go to add to cart and then look at your cart and then add to checkout. I just go straight to the bottom and I go, by the way, here's a little order bump. And then here is the checkout information, fill out your name and your credit card information and hit buy now and be done, right? And so we don't always need to send people to a cart or even to a separate checkout. That may not be what we need to do at all, right? But that is specific to the store and the product that they're selling.
Okay, right. So one thing that I think is interesting, you said you want the product page to be visual, right? And in the course of that, we're trying to tell a story, but we also want facts and information.
Yep.
So you don't want too much writing on the page, but how do you decide what writing to put on the page and how much?
So I think the thing is, we don't want extraneous writing, right? We don't want stuff like, so in the old days, people would just be like, let me tell you about this, and let me tell you about this, and you just went on, and you're like, I don't need this to make a decision. But that doesn't mean we want next to no text on the page, right? It's more about having the essential content on the page and removing the non-essential. Now, in the case of essential, you might say, I need to describe why you would want it, or who's the right kind of person for this. I might describe the background of where it came from, if the background is a compelling reason for you to own it, not if it's not, right? If I want to buy this hat, I'm going to buy the hat based on the look of the hat, how it fits my head, the style of the hat, but where the thread came from is not critical to this. But if I'm buying a money clip and it's an old money clip, or I'm buying a pocket watch and there's some history to it, the very nature of that history may be the reason I want to own it. So in that case, it's essential. In the case of the hat, it's not. So really the lens you look at when you're talking about content on the product page is it essential to help you close a deal? Is it essential to help you make that connection? Is it essential to tell the story you're trying to tell? If so, put it on the page. If not, get it off there, right? So, for example, I may not need to know on a hat like this. Do I need to know how much it weighs? No. Like what? Unless it suddenly weighs 10 pounds and putting on my head would give me, neck pain. There's no reason to tell me that. But if I want to know that it's a short brim, right? This measurement of how much of a brim is attached to the hat versus a large brim, that may be essential. So knowing which data is critical and not is a function of the product owner, the store owner, the person who's trying to sell and tell that story. You have to know what's critical to your product to help tell the right story. And that's what goes on the page. And if it's not part of that, get rid of it, right? So you have to be ruthless. You're absolutely right. You got to be ruthless about prioritizing what belongs and what doesn't belong. But it isn't always a little bit of content. It could be a lot of bit of content, but it's the right content, right? And then you need enough sufficiently to get someone to say, yeah, that's interesting. And then what's really crazy is there's certain products where the amount of content is a filtering factor for the kind of person who's buying, right? So you think about it and you go, hey, buying a hat, buying a watch, buying whatever, it's not a big deal, right? But if you're in the home improvement game and you're selling sandpaper, right? One of my earliest clients sold internationally. She ran one of the largest vendors for selling sandpaper. And it's crazy the amount of detail that goes into the sandpaper. But she's selling to people who this is what they know, right? They do different kinds of home improvement and different kinds of projects. So they know. And so she would write massive amounts of copy on the grain and the weight and what belt sanders it could go on and whatnot. And that helped highlight that it wasn't for everyday users, right? Like if it's me and I need sandpaper, I'm not going to buy in that store, right? Oh, it's too much text, too much whatever. But the kind of person who does the work would read that and be like, oh, good. Yes, good. Okay, that's perfect. Oh, yeah, I need this, right? The fullness of that content was a filtering function for the kind of audience she was looking for, right? So in a crazy way, right? Sometimes a lot of content can also be very, very helpful, which is why in most of these things, right, the answer is always it depends. But it comes down to the same answer, which is it's all about what's essential, right? Knowing your customer, knowing what's essential, and then saying, okay, then this is the amount of content I have to do. And that can be hard, right? If your customer is someone who wants just a little bit of information, you show up and you're like, but this is my baby. Like, I love this. I want to talk about it forever. And you're like, yeah, your customer doesn't. Focus on what's critical to tell the story and get out.
Okay. Chris, that was terrific. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for sharing that with us. That was great.
Awesome. Take care.
All right. We'll see you next time. All right, folks, there you have it. That wraps up my conversation with Chris Lemma. He shared a ton of valuable insights and advice today on what you can do to create product pages that turn visitors into customers. We also shared some tools and resources, which will all be linked up in the show notes. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Please consider subscribing, sharing with a friend, or leaving us a review in your favorite podcast directory. Until next time, best of luck in all that you do, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Store Builders Podcast.